Hey guys, it's that time of year again. All of the new holiday makeup releases are launching. We're seeing them on Trend Mood's page. We're seeing them on the new arrivals page at Sephora and Ulta. And honestly, it can be very overwhelming. And I know I'm adding a ton of things to my cart and building this huge list of products that I want, but I had to kind of stop myself and say, you know what, let me take a step back. Let me look through my collection, see if I can find similar products, maybe potential dupes. And that process not only helps me to appreciate the makeup that I have, but also prevents me from spending a lot of money. And it kind of tamps down that excitement a little bit of the new products once I realize that I might already have something super similar. So that's what we're gonna do today. I'm gonna walk you guys through some products that I've had my eye on, and I'll share with you the products that I pulled out of my own collection that I think could be really similar. So let's go ahead and jump right in, and we'll start with the new Anastasia Rose Metals palette. So this palette is undeniably gorgeous. I've been seeing it everywhere, and full disclosure, I did actually purchase this one because I've had so many requests to do a review of it. So that is going to be coming soon. But if you have had your eye on this one, I do want to show you some other palettes in my collection that I found that might be similar. And once I saw these palettes next to it, I realized that I actually didn't need this palette to begin with. And if I weren't on YouTube, I definitely would not have purchased it. So let me show you guys quickly what those are. The first one is the ColourPop Lust for Dusk palette. This is one of ColourPop's more underrated palettes, but it's one of my favorites. I happen to love it because just like the Anastasia Rose Metals palette, this one has that sort of earthy, grungy vibe. It's colorful, but not bright colorful. Everything is super muted, and you have the green tones, the coppers, the reddish colors, some neutrals mixed in. I think the ColourPop one is honestly super similar. And when you look at the swatches, like, I think it definitely gives you that very 90s, very grungy sort of vibe. It's honestly like the perfect fall palette. I'm wearing it on my eyes today in the video, and I really just used two colors. I used this red in my crease right here. It's a matte that has the little micro glitters, but once you blend it out, I don't see those at all. It really just kind of acts like a matte shade. And then this shiny pink up here. And this is just a beautiful palette. Honestly, I use this one so often, and I think it gives off a really similar vibe to Rose Metals. Another one that I thought was very similar, and this one's no longer available, but I know a lot of you have it in your collection, is the BH Cosmetics Smitten in Switzerland. I almost couldn't say that. So this palette also, I think, has a lot of the same colors that Rose Metals has. I don't think this one is exact, and I also think that the BH palette is a little bit brighter when it comes to the greens, and when it comes to the blue, it's not quite as muted as ColourPop's Lust for Dusk, but having some of the same tones in it reminded me that I need to take this palette out and play with it a little bit more. BH Cosmetics has such an incredible formula, at least their older formula was, and I still really enjoy using these palettes so much. So I wanted to bring this one back out to the front of my collection again because I think it is a beautiful fall color story. And like I said, I just really enjoy using it. I know you can't get this anymore. I have seen it on sites like Mercari and Poshmark though, so be sure to check there if you are interested in it. But once I saw these two palettes, I really didn't feel as much excitement over the Anastasia palette. And like I said, if I hadn't purchased it to do a review on it, I honestly don't think that I would have at this point. Another Anastasia palette that is going to be coming out very soon. I'm not sure if we have a date yet, but I saw it on Trend Mood's page. It's the Glam to Go palette. And this palette is so pretty. It's going to retail for $29, and it has these gorgeous pinks. But as soon as I saw it, it reminded me so much of ColourPop's Blush Crush. And this is a palette that I've had for a while now. I want to say at least 2 years, maybe more. And the colors in here are so similar. It might not be an exact like shade for shade dupe, but certainly has the same vibe. And as soon as I saw it next to the Anastasia palette, I realized I really do not need this new one at all. If I want the lighter pink looks, I always reach for Blush Crush. It is such a good palette with an amazing formula. And while I do love Anastasia's formula, ColourPop's is really good too. And for me, it doesn't seem worth it to buy something with such a similar color story just for maybe a slightly different formula. So I'm just gonna hang on to Blush Crush, and I'm gonna skip that new Anastasia palette because I love this one. I use it so often. I really don't see any need to pick up the new one. Another palette that came out recently that I almost bought is this new one from Nomad. It's their Hudson Valley palette. And this one really spoke to me because I grew up in the Hudson Valley. That's where I'm from. I lived there until I was 30. So most of my life was spent there. My parents still live there. I go there all the time. I really don't live that far away, even though I am in Connecticut now. So it holds a special place in my heart. But as I was thinking it over, I realized that the whole reason that I really want that palette is just for the name and the theme of it. But when it comes to the actual colors, I'm not the biggest fan of wearing colorful eyeshadow. I'm more of a neutral girl. If I do wear color, it's usually more muted color, like the ColourPop Lust for Dusk palette, for example. So I didn't really see myself getting a lot of use out of this, but if I did want to use something very fall inspired, I thought about the Too Faced Pumpkin Spice palette because I think this one is really, really similar. It might not be, again, an exact dupe, but this one has a lot of those same fall tones that are in it. It has gorgeous greens, coppery shades. It has some pink and purple. Again, not the same as the Nomad palette by any means, but it is very satisfying when I'm in the mood to do a fall look. And really, I only reach for palettes like this in maybe September, October, November, like this time of year, but I don't normally use it beyond that. So I really feel like this palette hasn't gotten much use since 2020 when it came out. So instead of just sitting in my collection and going to waste and going bad, I think it's important to just take this out and play with it again. So that's what I'm going to be doing. And it made me realize I definitely do not need the Hudson Valley palette. Another one that I think is really similar to is the Saharan palette from Juvia's Place. I think this also has a lot of the same tones that the Hudson Valley palette has. It doesn't have the blue, but it has the greens, it has the bright reddish orange, it has the bronze, some neutral shades. And again, it just kind of gives you that fall leaves sort of vibe. And Juvia's Place has one of my all-time favorite formulas. It's just incredible. If you haven't tried Juvia's Place, I think you'll be super impressed with the formula. It's very nicely pigmented, but easy to work with. And I have sometimes issues with really pigmented formulas being a struggle to blend. This is not one of them. Somehow her formula blends effortlessly and really easily, and I always love how my looks come out when I use Juvia's palettes. Not to mention they are very reasonably priced as well, especially for the type of formula that you're getting. So I think this is another awesome palette to use when I'm in the mood to do those fall looks. Moving on, we have the new Pat McGrath Celestial Nirvana palette, and this one is so gorgeous. Look at the colors in here. You have the purples, the pinks. It is stunning. And I'm always so tempted by these holiday palettes because they're a little less expensive than her normal palettes, plus you get way more colors to choose from. But as I thought about it, I've purchased the last two in a row, last year's and then in 2020, I bought that one as well. And I hardly ever use them. So I have a feeling if I purchase this one, the same thing is going to happen. Plus, I was able to look through my collection and find some palettes that have very similar color stories. The first one is from Profusion. It's their Ethereal palette. So before you say Profusion, Pat McGrath, they don't compare, I get that. I know there's a lot of huge Pat McGrath fans out there. I personally am in the camp that thinks that they're not worth the price. I might get some hate for saying that, but I just don't see it. I think the formula is good, but is it better than other high-end palettes I have? For me, not really. And I think Profusion has a very good formula for the price. If you're on a budget, I think it's excellent. And in some cases, I do think Profusion does compete with certain high-end brands as well. So you do get a lot for your money with Profusion. Let's just put it that way. But I thought this Ethereal palette had a really similar vibe to the Pat McGrath. You have the purples, you have the blues, the pinks, and this palette actually has a lot of different textures in it as well, which is really nice. Some of these shades are actually cream shadows. You have one that comes off a little more glittery. You have ones that are smooth. So there's a lot of different textures going on. I think the colors are beautiful. Like I said, I'm not into really bright color, but I think these are subdued enough that you can really create some kind of, like the name suggests, very ethereal, very feminine looks. So I love this palette. I think it's fantastic. And then another palette that I think has those beautiful purples and the blue and the green is the Glamlight Michaela palette. I got this recently at CVS and it's huge. You have so many colors in here, way more than the Pat McGrath. It's a lot less expensive, but Glamlight's formula is incredible. If you haven't tried it yet, I highly recommend it. And when I first showed this palette on my channel, channel. A bunch of you guys actually went to CVS and bought either this one or the smaller one that came with it. And I got a lot of you coming back to me saying how much you love the formula of this and that you had never tried Glam Light before. So it's awesome. It's definitely a very high-end formula. And when you look at this next to the Pat McGrath, I think there are so many similarities. Like I said, it has the purples, the golds, it has the dark green, it has some neutrals mixed in as well. I think the only shades it really doesn't have are like those two reddish orangey shades. There's one that's kind of a salmon color, one that's a little bit darker. It doesn't have those, but I think everything else you could probably easily dupe with this palette, and it's so much less expensive. You can get these at CVS now, so I definitely recommend checking out either one of these palettes if you had your eye on the Pat McGrath, and if you already have these, then you're one step ahead. Another set of palettes I recently saw come out on Trend Mood's page are these new Dior palettes. One is a khaki palette and the other one is burgundy. They're 9-pan palettes and retail for $49 each. And honestly, I haven't tried a Dior palette in a long time, but these sort of spoke to me, especially the green one. I thought it looked really pretty. But as I was looking at these, I was thinking, what do these remind me of? They remind me of something. And a little while later, it hit me that it made me think of the Sigma 9-pan palettes. And I have these two, one in Ivy, which is like a green color story, and then one in Rosy. So let's take a look at the Ivy one quickly next to the Dior Khaki. And I think these are so similar, especially because in each palette you have 3 green shades and then the rest are pretty much neutrals. But one of the things I actually like better about the Sigma palette is that it's a little bit more subdued. The greens aren't as bright as in the Dior, and also the gold isn't as yellowy gold. It's more of an antique gold in the Sigma. And I just like that a little bit better overall. Not to mention, I love Sigma's formula, and I don't know about Dior. In the past, when I've tried their eyeshadows, they were very hit or miss. I remember expecting them to be fantastic because it's Dior and they're a luxury brand, but I just remember not being super impressed by them. And then when it comes to the Sigma Rosy palette next to the burgundy one from Dior, again, I think these are really, really similar. The colors might be in a different order, but I think all of the tones are pretty much there. Both palettes have a shimmery gold shade and also a lighter matte shade, and then the rest are just like all of these rosy tones. And you guys know I'm super into my rosy tones, and this particular palette from Sigma, I know I've talked about on my channel multiple times. I just love the colors in this one. They're just so flattering on my pink undertone, and these rosy colors just really bring that out a little bit and just look very complementary. And like I already mentioned, I love Sigma's formula, so honestly, I think you can't go wrong with these Sigma palettes, and I'm definitely not buying the Dior ones now that I realized I have these because the color stories are so similar. They're 9-pan palettes, they're a lot more affordable, and I already know that I love Sigma's formula, whereas with Dior, I'm not really sure what I would be getting with it, so I'm just gonna go ahead and stick with these two. Another palette I saw recently that I thought looked so beautiful is the Nars Stargaze palette. This is gonna retail for $60, and I honestly can't resist Nars palettes because I love their formula. This one looks like it's gonna be sort of a deeper, smokier color story. It has a lot of warm tone neutrals, but then you also have a pale pop of lavender and then like a deeper purple next to that one. And my knee-jerk reaction when I first saw it was, I need to buy this because I love Nars, but then I thought about it more and more, and number one, I'm not super into deep, dark, smoky palettes. I don't wear smoky eyes that often. And as I was thinking about it a little bit more, I felt like the color story sort of reminds me of the Norvina palette from Anastasia. And I would say this is in the top 2 of my favorite Anastasia palettes, the other one being Soft Glam. That one and this one are just my absolute favorites of all time. And when I look at this one next to the Nars palette, I do think there's a lot of similarity going on. The Norvina palette has all of those warm tone neutrals, but also the purples as well. But I think what draws me to the Norvina palette more than the Nars is that it's not as deep and smoky. There are a lot of lighter shades that can work better for my skin tone. But if I did happen to want to create a smoky eye, the Norvina palette also does have a couple of smoky shades. So I think it's a little bit more versatile than the Nars palette will be. And overall, I just love the formula of the Norvina palette. It's so soft, so buttery. The shimmer shades are incredibly smooth. Nothing's overly sparkly or glittery, and the matte shades just blend like a dream. They're just so soft and effortless. So once I pulled this out and looked at it next to the Nars palette, I realized that this just has all the things that I want in a palette, whereas the Nars one is probably just a little bit too deep and smoky for me, and I probably will not reach for it as often. So I'm definitely just gonna stick with this one for now. Next up, there are a few stunning blush palettes that are coming out. The first one is from Charlotte Tilbury. It's her Pillow Talk Blush Quad. This is gonna be $75, which is really crazy for a blush palette. But I mean, just look at it. How gorgeous is this? It's really difficult to resist, especially just the packaging and everything. It looks amazing. There are two versions of it, but the one that I'm particularly looking at is the light version. And in this palette, you have two matte shades, one that's like a bright rosy pink down on the bottom, and then one in the upper left-hand corner that looks like a little bit more of a dusty rose. And then you have two highlighter shades, one that's more of like a champagne highlight, and then one that's a pinker highlight that could be like a blush topper. But I think the shades in this palette that were definitely attracting me the most are those two matte blushes. They just look absolutely gorgeous. And so I was looking through my blush palette collection because I think blush palettes are something that I tend to buy right away when I see them, but I never use them. They sit in this drawer right behind me, and I usually just reach for a single blush when I'm doing my blush. I hardly ever use palettes. I don't know why, because I buy tons of them. So I was looking through that drawer and I happened to find this blush palette from Moira. It's called Ooh La La. I used this a ton when I first got it, but then I put it away and I never pulled it out again. But this is the most beautiful blush palette ever. So in here you have 6 different shades. You do have one highlight, which the Charlotte Tilbury has. But what I really liked about this one and what stood out to me are these two matte blushes right on the end. They look so similar to the two colors that are in the Charlotte Tilbury. We have the bright rosy pink and then the dusty pink, which is actually the one that I'm wearing on my cheeks today. And I also put the highlight on as well. But looking at it next to the Charlotte Tilbury, I think, right? These shades look so close. Not to mention in the Moira palette, you're also getting some of those more nude, like neutral color blushes, and that really soft pink called Blossom as well. And you can totally mix these together. You could use that Blossom shade to tone down some of the darker ones if you wanted to. And the formula of the Moira palette is amazing. If you've tried their other powder blushes, then you know what I'm talking about. They're super smooth. They have just the right amount of pigmentation. They're not too crazy pigmented that you can't blend them, but they're also not super sheer either. So I really forgot how much I love this palette until I took it out again and I started using it and seeing these two colors right here, which were pretty much the whole reason that I wanted the Charlotte Tilbury palette in the first place. I feel pretty satisfied now that I don't need to buy that, even though the packaging looks really beautiful and that's definitely sucking me in. But no, I don't need to spend $75 on that when I have this one. And then there was one more blush palette that I saw that I really was interested in, and this was the one from Patrick Ta that just launched recently. It's $58 and it comes with 6 shades. Now I think the top row is cream blushes and the bottom row is powder. This sort of presented a challenge for me when I was looking through my collection because I don't think I have any blush palettes that have a mix of cream and powders in them, but I did find a couple that I really thought were very similar. The first one is from Profusion, and this is their Blush 1 palette. First of all, just the packaging looks the same, and this is like $5 compared to $58, so the price is insane. I'm sure the packaging feels cheaper than the Patrick Ta one, but it's $5, so I'm not really worried about the packaging. But what really struck me about this one is if you look at the Patrick Ta, it has 2 pink shades on the left, then in the center it has 2 kind of peachy shades, and then on the right side you have like a nude matte and then like a golden highlight. And the Profusion palette has almost the same thing. You have Bliss and Blossom as your pinks. Then over here you have Sweetheart and Popular that are a little more peachy. And then you have Delight and Bronze on the bottom as like a matte nude shade and then a golden highlight. So even though they're in like a different order in the palette, it has very similar colors. And honestly, Profusion's blush formula is so good. It's really, really smooth, especially when it comes to those shimmer shades. They're not chunky like you think they would be in a $5 palette. They're incredibly smooth and really finely milled. There's no glitter glitter, there's no sparkle. They just look so nice on your skin, and the matte shades blend incredibly well. You would never think in a million years that this was a $5 blush palette when you're actually applying it to your cheeks. Maybe as far as the packaging goes, you'll be able to tell, but if you're somebody who doesn't really care that much about packaging and you just care about the overall performance of the product, I think you're gonna love this one. And then one more blush palette that I really love, but I haven't used in a while, is the Sigma Cor de Rosa blush palette. And I also felt like this one was kind of similar to the Patrick Ta one as well, because again, in the center here, you have your pink tones, then you have these kind of peachy coppery shades on this side, and then over here, you have more of like the nude tones. And in this palette, you have 4 matte shades and 2 shimmers. And the formula is really outstanding. You get so much product in here. You get 6 really large blushes. And if you haven't tried Sigma's blush formula, I think you'll really enjoy it. They are very velvety, super smooth and finely milled again, and they just grab on for a powder blush and almost like leave a stain behind. They last all day on me. So it's really an awesome blush formula, and the colors are just super stunning. So knowing that I have these 2 palettes, I really don't feel like I need to run out and buy the Patrick Ta palette anymore. Also, if you're into cream blushes, there's another palette that I think you guys would really enjoy. I've talked about this many times on my channel. I haven't brought it up in a while, so those of you who are new may not have seen me talk about this, but those of you who have been around a while, you know which one I'm gonna say. It's the Pixie Beauty and Louise Rowe blush palette. This is actually a blush and lip palette. You can use these as lipsticks. I personally like to use them more as blushes because I find them to be a little bit drying for lipsticks. These are the kind of cream blushes that dry right to a powder finish, so they're not going to stay like sticky and dewy on your cheeks, and I tend to prefer that when it comes to cream blushes, so these are perfect. They're super long lasting as well, and I've had this palette, I want to say, for probably like 2 years now, and it's not dried out at all. I can still totally use it. Everything picks up perfectly fine. It swatches beautifully, like no issues with it whatsoever as far as drying out. The packaging has kept everything really fresh. And when you look at the swatches, some of the colors look like they're a little bit similar. Some of them look like they kind of repeat a little. But when you consider that the pan sizes are small, I just figured I have double the colors. So if one gets used up, I feel like I can just then go to a similar color and just start using that one. So it really doesn't bother me that there are some that look like repeats. But this is a product that I really don't hear a lot of people talking about. It's the only cream blush palette that I have in my collection, but it's fantastic. Highly recommend checking this out. I believe you can still get it at Target. All right, so I think I just talked myself out of about $400 worth of new makeup that I had on my wish list, but honestly, I feel so good about it. These are all products that I already know and love, and because I have a pretty large makeup collection, they don't get enough use and they don't get enough love, so I'm definitely going to keep all of these out and start using them more. And I really hope that this video inspires all of you to do the same thing, to just take a look in your makeup collection before you actually spend the money on the new products, because I think if you do that, you're gonna find that you have some things that you might have forgotten about that you love just as much. In addition to looking through your collection, I definitely also recommend waiting. If you're gonna put something into your cart, instead of buying it immediately, let it sit there for a week and then go back and see how you feel about it afterwards. I think a lot of times we see new things launch and you just automatically put it into your cart and buy it, but giving it that waiting period kind of helps you to avoid an impulse purchase, and during that time you could really think about then what else do you have, and if you can't really find anything else in your collection, then go back and buy it. I know for me, if I wait a week, probably 8 out of 10 times I go back and realize that I'm actually not super excited about it anymore, but if I am still excited about it and I haven't really found or thought of anything else in my collection that I love that's similar and I just can't get the new product out of my head, that's when I know that it's probably a good idea just to buy it, because it'll definitely get a lot of use. But I would say most of the time, giving it that week just makes it seem less exciting in the end. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. If you end up doing this, I'd love for you to come back and let me know what the product was that you were interested in, and then what you found in your collection that sort of made you less excited about it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for spending part of your day here with me. As always, I really appreciate it so much. If you're new to my channel, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you enjoyed this video. And also, if you feel like sticking around for a while, I'm going to pop up 2 of my recent videos on the next screen to check out. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you all in my next video. Take care, guys. Bye.